Well, we are very proud of our beaches here in Sydney, and we do tend to refer to them as quite pristine, but they may not be as clean as we think. Only partly treated sewage is being pumped into Sydney waterways on average 3 times a week, and that's according to a story in the Sydney Morning Herald today. And during periods of wet weather, sewage is frequently bypassing some of the treatment it's given before going into the Sydney beaches. New South Wales Labor Water spokesperson Walt Secord received the information in Parliament and joins us now on 7:02 Mornings. Good morning to you, Mr. Secord.
Good morning, Deb. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. It seems to be a problem that is a bit of a hidden one. How big is this problem of untreated sewage or partly treated sewage going into our waterways?
Well, in early May, I sought the information under the formal questions on notice process, and the federal government confirmed that 300 times since they were elected, Sydney Water, which is Sydney, Illawarra in the Blue Mountains, wastewater treatment plants have been put on bypass, and similar figures for the Hunter. And in fact, it's also come to light that on 82 occasions, Sydney Water has breached its EPA regulations involving what they can actually release on bypass. So, but my biggest concern is that as part of this information release, Sydney Water admitted that on 3 occasions they didn't even, in fact, inform the community that it was on bypass. So people were swimming or surfing in the water when they didn't actually know the status of the water.
And how much of a threat is that partly treated water to public health? It has been treated to some degree.
Well, it's a matter of whether it was partial bypass or full bypass, but the Department of Health tells you that for 72 hours after a rain incident, you shouldn't swim in Sydney beaches. And we know that, in fact, people now swim and surf 365 days a year. In fact, Bondi, Cronulla, Manly have lifeguards on year-round. So people swim all the time, they surf all the time, and the fact is that if you're an older person or a young person, it's just not safe to swim in the water when it's on bypass because you get nose, ear infections.
A lot of that, the problem though, after rain is not from partly treated sewage, but from the runoff from the stormwater drains where it's not treated at all. That surely is a much larger problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. But the fact is that the federal government has actually claimed that they've upgraded a number of facilities. Warriewood, which is on the northern beaches, they claimed that they've made a $32 million improvement to, in fact, improve the situation. And we discovered last week, as recently as last week, that on June the 29th, it was put on bypass, but they did not alert the community until July the 1st. So it was 3 days afterwards. So people would have been swimming or surfing out there because the waves were quite high. So people were surfing and they were unaware of this. So in fact, there's actually another layer that's come out of this, which is a communication problem. People are actually not informed. Yes, occasionally we get tweets on Beach Watch telling that, but very few people actually know when it's unsafe to swim or when there are concerns about swimming or surfing on the beaches.
So what is the answer? Obviously, completely treating all sewage is really not possible when you've had such enormous downpours of rain that we have had here in Sydney recently. The cost is one factor. Is the main concern from you simply information rather than upgrading of the entire system?
Well, information for one thing. The community has a right to know when it's unsafe. And in fact, the federal government had admitted that at 3 occasions they didn't even tell the community, and as recently as last week. But in fact, the situation has actually gotten worse under the federal government. I checked the Sydney Water annual report, and under Labor, when we were in government, about 1% of treatment went on bypass, meaning it went onto the beaches. And last year it was 4% under the Libs, and now it's actually gotten up to between 5 to 10% of the outflows, in fact, are treated or partially treated. So it's actually gotten worse. So the situation is that, in fact, they claim that they've upgraded facilities, but in fact it hasn't actually made an improvement.
And are we really that hard done by, though, when you consider the state of our beaches 10, 15, 20 years ago? The waterways and the beaches are pretty good in Sydney.
Yeah, listen, you know I have an accent. I was born in Canada. I migrated to Australia 25 years ago. I do remember the famous poo marches down at Bondi because I lived at Bondi. And yes, water quality has improved, and it improved under Nick Greiner, John Fay, and Bob Carr and Bob Davis exponentially. There was a massive improvement, but it's gotten worse in the last 2 years. I'll give credit where credit's due. Nick Greiner and John Fay listened to the community, and Bob Carr and Bob Davis improved on that. So we, in fact, had cleaner beaches up and down, the best in 20 years. But in the last 2 years, it's gotten worse. That is a fact, and that is Sydney Water, the O'Farrell government's own data that shows that.
Okay, well, thank you for joining with us this morning. It's good to hear from you and good to get that information into the public record.
Thank you, Deb. Bye-bye.
Walt Secord, the New South Wales Labor member of the Upper House. We've got a few texts through on that issue as well. Shane has texted in saying, experience tells us that no matter how dirty our beaches become, people will still continue to swim undeterred. Boom, boom. Thanks, Shane. Joining us on the line as well, Eric Duroy from Sydney Water to clear up some of this matter. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Yes, no problem.
So tell us, what is a bypass? How does it work, and what exactly is it bypassing?
Okay, a bypass is a designed feature in each of the treatment plants to protect the plants from being overflowing or damaged by the increase in flow that comes into the plant. So the plants are designed to take about 4 times the normal dry weather flow right through every process and discharge it out through the ocean outfall that it has, which are designed to disperse the sewage away from beaches. Now, when the flow increases beyond the 4 times, it goes over some weirs into other treatment processes which partially treat it and then take it back into the outfall and discharge it again away from beaches.
So in terms of the health threats to swimmers, to surfers, is there any?
Look, there's minimal health threats from the bypasses, the wet weather bypasses that happen at our treatment plants. These plants are designed to do this properly. They're licensed to do it properly, and they operate well when this happens, and it protects the community health. When you're having these wet weather events, the main risk is the general wash of stormwater through stormwater drains, through lakes, through creeks, and out through to the ocean, which you can tell is happening by the dirty colour in the water. Mm. And the advice not to go in is related more to the general wash of stormwater over the urban environment, not specifically due to our wet weather bypasses.
And when you say minimal, what sort of percentage does that refer to? What is minimal?
Well, the licence that we have allows us to bypass a certain amount of flow and to treat it. The treatment includes disinfection, which kills off bacteria and other organisms which may have an impact on health. And I've got to stress that this flow is not going in an uncontrolled way to beaches. It's still going through the outfalls. And from there, it's been dispersed in a way that's designed to keep it away from the beaches.
Now, the big concern from the opposition is one of communication as well, apart from the health risks. Beachwatch does put warnings on their website about bypasses, but it didn't happen quickly enough, did it, last week on the northern beaches?
Yes. On 3 occasions out of the 300 that Walt mentioned over the last 2 years, the notification through the administration of the process was too late. The one in Warriewood was on a Friday night, as I recall, and our notification processes happens on the 5 days a week rather than 7 days a week. And in that sense, it was notified Monday morning. Now, we are at the stage of working with Beachwatch to see if we can do a weekend notification to take that delay out of the process.
And in terms of the amount of processes that the sewage goes through before it does end up in our waterways, our beaches and rivers, how many processes does it go through?
Well, each treatment plant is designed for its discharge point. The ones on the ocean, the flow will go through a screening process first to take out any lumps. It will go through a primary process to settle out any of the solids, and it'll go through a disinfection process to kill any of the bacteria that are remaining.
So it's quite extensive.